Hello, my name is Rusty Coones, and I have with me Jim Nickla, ABATE president of Local One. How you doing, Jim?
Really good. It's been a good week. We had our first meeting at a new location yesterday and have some plans to reach out to new members this year.
Great, great. I want to get into all that with you about ABATE and all the good you guys do. You guys have been around a long time, and we really appreciate it in the community. But first, I'd like to go back into your personal history with motorcycles. When were you first, and what age were you when you first got introduced into motorcycles?
Well, I actually got started on motorized bicycles. I was about 13 years old, and I put together a bike with a Briggs and Stratton motor and a wash machine pulley. Started riding around the backyard. My brother-in-law took it out for a ride and told my old man how fast it went and how poor the brakes were, and that was the end of that. I had to tear it apart and put it back into the garage. So that was my first introduction, and then I was involved in bands, and a buddy of mine, his uncle, sold me his Triumph chopper, and I had that for a while. I had some problems with that. Typically, with Triumphs, they either ran or they didn't. With that Lucas, electronics, but that was my first introduction to. That was my first motorcycle. I got hooked up into some of the clubs out here. I originally used to work on race cars, on the street racing and that, and a bunch of my friends started to get involved in the clubs, and that was my first introduction to the motorcycle MRO, rights organizations and that. I didn't have a real deep history in that. That was, God, that was in 70, 73 or 74. And I got too close to some of the clubs, and I decided that the only way I was going to get out of town with no money in my pocket was to join the Marine Corps. While I was in the Marine Corps,
Yeah.
we were having a big party at my house. It was getting close to everybody getting out, and I was on one of those brand new lowriders, lowriders,
Oh yeah.
and a guy in a Kawasaki 900 crashed into me and tore the bottom of my foot off. So that was my first introduction to the lawsuits and dealing with law firms.
So you had a permanent injury on your foot?
Yeah, I tore the bottom of my left foot. Actually, they kind of say it degloved. All that heel cushion and all that was ripped out. It took a year for that to close up, and
Another motorcycle hit you to do that?
yeah, another KZ 900. Trapped my foot between the two bikes. That
How
big
how
pointy
did it
cover on
happen?
the right side.
Did he come up from behind you or
Yeah,
what?
yeah. The reason we had to lay the bike down because his passenger fell off the back of his bike, and eventually he crashed.
Uh,
And I crawled to the side of the road and wound up spending almost 5 hours on the table debriding my foot from that wreck. And so that was my first introduction to crashes,
Gee.
serious crashes.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Yeah, I
So
spent a
what year
couple of
was
weeks.
that when that happened?
That was 77, 78.
Hmm.
Yeah, 77, I think
And,
it was.
and when did you get introduced into a bait?
I kind of knew about it in Chicago, but I spent a couple of winters recuperating at the Heinz VA in Chicago, and they did a lot of uh, treatment on my foot. It was an open wound for a year,
Wow.
and so I got out here to California. Spent a couple of years knocking around with a band, never really doing anything, and then in the '90s, I hooked up with Sarge Matthews, and he invited me to the meetings, and said, "Hey, look, if you're going to ride, you need to get some information and find out what's going on in the riding community." It took a while, but I finally got my act together and joined up. So since 90, 91, somewhere around there, I got involved with ABATE Local One. We
Mhm.
had a lot of good mentors back in those days. Most of them are either gone, to retirement or have passed on. Uh, and so I wound up picking up the mantle myself due to a change of management. So I've been the president of Local One for about a year and a half now.
Mhm.
And it's a challenge. It's always with these organizations, it's a challenge to keep people motivated, to show up and not just give lip service. So, like currently,
Tell me what you guys do to benefit the writing public,
well,
the people that
if you,
don't know.
people don't realize that our legislation in Sacramento, they don't really care about the writing community at all. They have an agenda, and that agenda is driven by, reelection campaigns and money. And because we're a small group, we don't have the kind of money it takes to lobby, but we do have our own lobbyists. Jim Lombardo has been our lobbyist. Now his son, Jim Jr., is uh, keeping us informed on the laws. And that's our main strength, is to get the information out to the writing community, what law changes and how it's going to affect them. And we're currently fighting a bill that it's now considered an exhaust bill. But in reality, it places the onus on the rider to prove that his bike isn't noisy. If, for example, if you get pulled over, a cop can write you a fix-it ticket, and it's been signed into law, but they don't have any way to implement it. This is the kind of crazy, poorly thought out legislation that is coming out of Sacramento. And then we have to fight to protect our rights before they reconstruct this or try to gerrymander it to make it fit for them. We all realize that in the communities, people want to have quiet. But like for me, I live near an airport, and they've expanded the amount of flights at the Van Nuys Airport, and they don't really care about what the people say. And that's if we don't have a voice, and that voice is either membership or funding for our PAC and our ability to go out and legislate, or try to at least to inform the members of how to vote. And we do all of those things. We send out questionnaires to the politicians and get their opinions, and will they support motorcycle issues. So this is the kind of work we're doing on a day-to-day basis. We don't do a lot of fundraising. For my local, our main one is our Polar Bear Run, and that funds our obligation to the state level. And we're constantly working on trying to get the message out and the changes of law that are going on. This new bill is kind of insidious because it puts the onus on you. If you can't get your bike cleared within 90 days, you can no longer register that bike in California. And what if you're coming from out
Forever?
of state? Say again?
Is that forever? Like if you don't get it taken care of within 90 days, your registrations will not be valid out from any point after that?
That's the way the law is written today.
That's
Uh,
crazy.
the uh, the way it was written was if a officer pulls you over and says your bike is noisy, he thinks your bike is noisy. He
Yeah.
can give you a fix-it ticket, and if you don't resolve it in 90 days, as it was originally written, you would no longer be able to register that bike in California. Uh, they did make one change to it and send it into the courts. Well, we know the courts are overcrowded with this nonsense, and especially one that the testing facilities don't even exist yet, and the conditions of how they would apply that. Because when you do a testing of a 95 dB noise, it's partially driving past the meter, and then they do a placement behind the bike. So it's not a type of thing that it's a stationary test, and in this particular case, the officer doesn't have to have any training. He doesn't have to carry a DME meter because they don't know how to use them, and the way they're applying it is not legal. It doesn't meet the requirements. So these are all things that we're fighting every day, and these bills sometimes will be turned into 2-year bills, and that's what we've been dealing with over the last 4 years, of dealing with bills that were kicked to a 2-year bill. And it's easy for them to just slip that, if they're really pushing it, to slip it into another bill that's getting signed, and we lose our voice at that point. That's why having a Jim Lombardo and his firm working with us really pays off, because we do try to they give us a heads up.
So they're down there acting as lobbyists, talking to these congressmen or whatever that make these laws and trying to get some common sense put into this.
Yeah,
And,
we've constantly got that. As a matter of fact, we're doing a unification rally on the 21st and 22nd up in Sacramento out here by us. And it's to get into the offices and talk to our legislators and express our concerns, especially on bills like this, that uh, it should have never been signed. But the governor didn't have to expend any political clout because it was based on beach communities, and that's money for his reelection campaigns or wherever his future goals are. So it's not about serving the constituency or protecting people over noise. It's about reelection campaigns, and
yeah.
as I see it. So we've done everything we can to get the message out. And one of our problems is the members that are active, we're getting older and we need to recruit younger members.
So let me
So,
ask you this. Anybody can join ABATE and support this, correct?
yeah, we're non-discriminatory. Any motorcycle from any make or model, whatever your riding skills are, we encourage you to join up because it's about getting the information to you that you need to protect yourself.
Yeah.
Recently, laws have changed in other states, and several states are looking at removing the helmet again. We had in Arizona recently, they have a filtering bill, which makes more sense in those communities that have narrow roads, filtering up to the front of the pack. So you're not trapped in a group of, four wheelers. It makes it safer for you and safer for them. The idea of being behind a parked car, trapped between a rear bumper and a front bumper, that's the most dangerous situation I've ever been in.
Yeah.
The idea that, we're doing something wrong or we scare people. Part of the problem is that drivers, they're not driving anymore. They've got so many distractions inside their vehicles,
Yeah.
and they're relying on technology. For example, a Tesla, when its automated driving system, it's supposed to be hands on the wheel and all of that, but we know that there are workarounds, modifications that can be made to vehicles,
Yeah.
and when it's right operating perfectly, it stays right in the center of the lane. So when that little mirror light goes from yellow to red, that Tesla is not going to move. It's going to stay right where it's at. And if the other car is narrowing over, he's not going to move over to the right to give you any other space as we split lanes.
Yeah.
The issue there is that it's much safer for me to get away from traffic than it is to be stuck in the traffic because they do not see us.
Yeah.
The most common excuse is, I never saw them. Well, are you actually using your mirrors? Are you doing the safe things, safe driving techniques, to make sure you know what's going on the road? And most of these people are distracted. And, so these are the kinds of things we're up against. This Up in Northern California, for example, they were doing trucks and there had to be a driver in a truck. Well, I read recently that I can't quote the article I read, but they were going to go to there would be no one in the truck and just the automatic truck driving down the road. To me, that there are places where that makes sense. If you're out in the outback in Australia, to have one of those triples going down the road that are, tied into satellites and that, but not on the streets in here in Van Nuys or on the 405 or the 101 out here. That's one of the most dangerous intersections that I've ever come across, in my years of driving. So these are the things we're up against and trying to get people aware of this type of commitment. We want to ride, and we don't want, just like this new law. I don't have the quote right here, but it's a right to purchase a combustion engine. With this future, they're talking, that they want to get rid of gas powered vehicles, or they don't want to build them anymore. Well, for us right now, that would kill our industry. I don't know about anybody else, but I'm not too keen on getting me an electric motorcycle. They have their purpose, but it's not for me. I like my Harley. I've had other bikes. I had Hondas, and they're a means to an end. For me, it was, it was a cheap form of transportation when I couldn't afford a bigger bike. When I got out here to California in the '80s, I bought a Sportster from a motorcycle rental outfit, and that I've been riding ever since. I moved up to a Road Glide. Uh, an older guy that he was getting up there in his 70s, and I'm not too far behind him now. He needed to get off his bike, and he had a fair price, and that was my first Road Glide, and I was hooked ever since. I've got a 2019 Road Glide and an '02 Deuce, and I just wound up with a Sportster trike, and that's going to be a challenge because I just had back surgery. So I've had my share of crashes. When I got out here to California, I was working at Rand in Santa Monica, and I don't know if you ever get down to that area, but on Lincoln and Washington, there used to be a pothole that always would pop up, and I had got my back tire in that pothole, and I guess I busted the fork. I mean, the rear spring, or cracked it and didn't realize it, and started going down the freeway back to the 405, and wound up with a high-speed wobble and wound up sliding down to 10. That was no fun. That was my first wreck in California.
Is that
I've
the
had
one at the 10 and right by the off ramp there by Lincoln and the 10? I think there's a
this
massive
is
pothole
coming
somewhere
from
over
the
there.
pier at Washington and Lincoln, making a right towards Bartell's, and then
Yeah.
heading back to the freeway. And I got up there on that ramp and got a high-speed wobble, and that was the end of that. Uh, that was my first, court date for motorcycles out here in California. Uh, I've had a couple bad wrecks out here. I was on the 134 heading towards Glendale, and these people are not paying attention to the speed, and the 134 and the 5 split off right there by the cemetery, and all of a sudden I hear the screeching of tires. I'm the only car in the carpool lane. I'm not a car. I'm on my bike, my 2017 Road Glide, and the car started to come into my lane. He kind of backed off, and then he got rear-ended and hit me in the fairing. And thank God I was on a Road Glide because I could still control the front end. Because
Yeah.
it's
Because
independent
the fairing's
steering.
fixed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that was the most scary moment I ever had. I went
Yeah.
flipping end over end off of the back of the bike because he hit me twice. He hit me in the fairing and then in the saddlebag. And after that, the worst cases I've had were, in traffic, people just, moving out of the lane without looking to see if there's anybody in that lane. If there's a clear lane, they just make some really dumb moves. I had After that one, about a year later, I was coming up to Howard Hughes Parkway south on the 405, and I was in the carpool lane, moved all the way over. That's like seven lanes plus the exit ramp, and there used to be 2 lanes that exited, and Caltrans, in their infinite wisdom, decided they were going to turn it down to one. Well, traffic backs up, and no one wants to wait in line, so the guy forced his way in the line, and I had to lock the bike up and lay it down or hit the back bumper of a car. And if you ever hit anything that isn't moving, you lose. By
Yeah.
laying the bike down, at least I was able to control my outcome. It wasn't a perfect scenario, but it was something that I know works. And so I wound up with some road rash and not a bunch of busted bones, and heaven forbid getting killed. And then I mean, it's
Done
just like
over. Yeah.
even in the valley at Victory West, heading up to Canoga, where the old Top Rocker used to be Bargers, and it was the strangest thing. There was about 2 blocks of cars in the right-hand lane, the number 2 lane, and I was in the number 1 lane, and it was a clear shot all the way up to the stoplight. And I knew not everybody is going to be making a right north on Sepulveda, so I started slowing down, and no sooner did I make the thought cross through my head, the guy turned left in front of me. And so organizations like Russ Brown and having a voice when this happens is important.
Yeah.
and the advocacy that you guys have done and continue to do now with Russ is gone, being gone out of the uh, office, but still, it's important for the work you guys do. From my point of view, our local will always support you because you support us, and that's what it's all about. MORs really need
Yeah.
to work together. Uh, it isn't about individuals; it's about the goal. The goal is to be able to keep riding and keep riding safely as best we can control. The
Yep.
other stuff is just you know just the headaches of life. So
So, so tell everybody right now, what's the best way to contact you guys for writers that want to get involved and support ABATE and help out this situation?
the best way to reach out here in California is abate.org, and it'll give you a link to all the locals, or at least the addresses. My local is currently meeting on a second Tuesday of the month. The second Tuesday of the month at 6 p.m. And, we're here local. They can contact me through the ABATE website, or uh, my email is jnickla, Nickla, at AOL. And any information I could pass along, I would be happy to do that.
Great, man. It's really good talking to you. I appreciate you taking out the time right now, and I appreciate everything you're doing for the biking community. Keep it up, man. We need more people like you, and I'm glad to hear that there's people up there working in Sacramento trying to turn some of this stuff around or affect
I
it.
learned a long time ago as a union executive. I was a vice president for a local here. And if you don't fight for your rights, and if you don't fight for your members' rights, you have nothing. They'll take it away in a heartbeat. And we've had those occasions where trying to address those issues and pass that information around to other legislators to get them to realize the importance of that freedom. For us, one of the best things that we have going for us is CHP has to obey the same laws that we obey, and so the motorcycle officers from CHP, they're not going to give up lane splitting. It's a tool that they need and use, and as a rider, I find it's the best way to stay safe out there. So,
Yeah, I agree with you. You know,
the only other thing we had was the helmet bill, and we haven't actually pushed that in years because no one wants to carry it. And the younger riders, that the helmets, the full face helmets and the leathers have become their uniform for riding. The older riders, we wear a helmet, only because we have to. So uh, a lot of states now are repealing that, and maybe one day again in California, because that was part of the reasons I came out here. I grew up on Route 66, sitting on the road before the I-55, the main freeways were built, watching all the trucks come in to the slaughter yards in Chicago. And, my goal was to get out here someday. And when I finally got out here, we rode for a couple of years, and then boom, they imposed the helmet bill again,
yeah,
so
1991. I
yeah.
remember that.
So
We always used to go. Nevada had the helmet law, and we didn't have it for all those years.
right.
So every time I'd ride to Vegas or somewhere in Nevada, I'd have to get somebody's old football helmet or something, and I'd strap it on my sissy bar, and I'd wear it while I was there. And then when I came back into California, I'd just throw the thing out in the desert while I'm riding and just get rid of it.
Yeah. I've been, profiled so many times for helmets, and it's usually the officers are being told to make an excuse for their profiling. It's one of the excuses is, well, we're profiling helmets and front license plates. Well, I don't have a front license plate on my bike, that. And, in Santa Monica, I had a guy, he was at Rose, and I was on whatever that street is that comes from the pier north. And I'm stuck in traffic. This guy makes a left at the light, pulls in behind me, and I'm about 30 cars from the light, stopped, and he writes me a ticket for my helmet because he didn't think my helmet was legal. And the argument is it says dot on there. He says, well, I don't care. That's the kind of stuff you have to deal with in some communities, especially the beach communities.
Yeah, because
And
they're
it's a
trying to
sad,
get the noise down and keep the bikes out of there in a lot of cases. I hear you. Yeah.
Through gentrification, the beaches have become very anti anybody that doesn't fit their mold.
Yeah.
And, especially with the kind of money that was spent by uh, these tech companies that moved down and bought up a lot of the property in Santa Monica. They don't want us there. Even though we spent a lot of money, they don't care. I mean, on average, if you go out to eat down in there, it's going to cost you $100, with two people. And if you drink too, it's that too. For me, I've been sober for 33 years. I don't miss it at all. I prefer not to ride with people that are drinking, So like one of the things that a lot of organizations that I belong to, you don't drink on the rides, and at the end of the ride, you're free to do whatever you want. It's about our own personal freedoms, but it's also about each other's safety, and we all have an obligation to protect each other. So,
Yeah, I think that's a good policy right there. I mean, it's a great policy. It's going to keep people safe, you know?
well, I appreciate the opportunity to at least talk about these things. For me, one of the biggest things that what sent me into the Marine Corps was a lot of the clubs were getting too wild, especially in Chicago in the 70s. And getting out of town with no money in my pocket, the option was the Marine Corps, as I saw it at the time. Little did I know that I would be, have the bottom of my foot ripped off, and that was an awakening. That really made me look at safety on motorcycles and learning to keep my head on a swivel, make sure I know the conditions ahead of me and behind me. You can't just look at what's going on ahead of you. You got to make sure you see that idiot coming up at 90 miles an hour with his cruise control on. I had a friend of mine get rear-ended on his V-Rod, and it actually put a 90-degree bend in that aluminum wheel in the back, and he was hanging on for dear life on the hood of that guy's car. So these are things that you've got to be aware of your situation at all times when you ride. To me, it's the next thing to flying or being, that's my religion. Get out on the bike and go for a ride.
Yeah.
That freedom. And I don't know any other place you can get that anymore. And they're trying to take that away from us through this legislations. So.
Yeah. Well, keep doing the fight, man, and we're supporting you. All
All
right.
right, my friend. I appreciate it, Rusty. Thank you very
Really good
much.
talking to you, man. I appreciate it. Maybe we can do it again sometime.
Anytime.
Okay. Talk to you later.